Hi, I'm BJ, and this is the Arcane Alienist Podcast.
So I recorded this episode, and as I got ready to publish it, it occurred to me that maybe the theme that's buried in a lot of this, there's a little discussion of game mechanics in response to the prompts. And, we're talking more about role-playing of the past, how did we get into role-playing and what were those early experiences. And I guess the central theme that I probably talked around and didn't put the point on is friends. I mean, this is talking about role playing games. My past in role playing games and what did or didn't happen. But I think the I guess the take home message here is friends. RPGs are about friends, and I've made lots of good friends along the way, and so I think that's I just wanted to put this quick segment in here before I start the episode as I originally recorded it. So, yeah, the take-home message for week 2 for me is it's all about friends. All right, it's RPG a day, week 2. I'm getting this out a couple days late. Sorry for that if anybody was eagerly waiting. I doubt anybody lost any sleep wondering where my podcast was. But it'll be late Tuesday when this drops, I think, and so we'll have to rewind to Sunday of this week. Sundays have a slightly different prompt. So for Sunday, August 7th, the question is, or it's called System Sunday, this is the prompt, describe a cool part of a system that you love. Wow, that's hard to narrow it down, but as I thought about this prompt, I think couple things. I really like 5th edition D&D's advantage and disadvantage mechanic. And I know I don't think that's the first system to ever use that type of roll. Just add if you're going to roll 2 dice, add a third one and then take the 2 best, roll 46 and drop the lowest for ability scores is sort of a thing like that. But as far as just the way advantage, now we're using it. I know there's Mongoose's Traveler uses a 2nd edition Traveler uses the same thing where you're rolling 2d6, you roll 3 and take the 2 best, or when you've got some sort of what do they call them, boons and banes? I can't remember what they call them in that. You roll 3d6, take the 2 lowest, but it's the same concept as advantage in 5th edition D&D of rolling 2d20s and take the better or the worst depending on that. But I think I like the way that clears a lot of the mental calculations that a game master has to do with, well, should that be a +1 or a -1 or a +3 or a -3 or, well, here there are 4 or 5 different factors that may stack or counter each other out, and you just say, look, this is a situation where you have, because of one or more factors, advantages, or one or more factors, you're at a disadvantage from what you would otherwise be. So it just cleans it up. I like that about 5th edition. With Pathfinder 2nd edition, I like the 3-action economy where it's just straightforward. There's no bonus action, there's no swift action, there's no major action or minor action. It's just you have 3 actions. Moving your movement speed is an action, and you can decide to move 3 times, move twice and do one other thing, move 2 other things and move once, stand still and do 3 things. And it's very simple. I think what you're going to see, the theme I'm going for here is anything that makes it simple and speeds up the decision making while you're playing, and not having to calculate and do a lot of if I do this, what if I do that? Well, if I do this, does this set off a reaction? What if I do that? Well, can I use a bonus action or not? No. It's just very straightforward. And of course, you've got things like spell casting and some other stuff that take 2 actions, but it's pretty easy to learn that. So I really enjoy that part of Pathfinder 2nd edition. Another mechanic, let's go old school that I like, or not old school itself, but at least OSR. I like the way Swords and Wizardry gives you a single save mechanic. I know that involves rethinking a little bit of the it doesn't involve rethinking the math. I'm making it more complicated. Is one of the things that Swords and Wizardry says that you can allow as an option is to then you can decide sort of what ability score is relevant. You know, if a person's trying to dodge a lightning bolt, that's probably dexterity. If a person's trying to ward off a poison effect, that's constitution, and so forth. And you can allow the player to apply their ability score adjustment to their roll, but you've got a fixed target number no matter what you're saving against. And it gets better. It doesn't get better with level, so it's still primarily a factor of the character's level, not so much their ability score. It's just the ability score can give a little tweak here or there to flavor it. But even if you don't use the ability score, I do like that simple uniform mechanic. You know, whenever you roll a saving throw, you know what you're trying to beat. You don't have to consult charts or tables on your... And I know it's not that hard. There's 5 saves at old school. But again, anything that simplifies conceptually, you don't have to think about it. You can just do it and look at the die result and know, yes or no, I got it or I didn't, and it's easy to make a ruling. I think with Swords and Wizardry doing that, you can also use the saving throw as a wider, in a wider sense. Like back when in the early days of Swords and Wizardry, I remember when the first white box came out, there was no thief class in it, and some people, other people developed thieves very quickly for the game. But one suggestion was to use the saving throw in place of thief skills, and just say, well, let a thief make a saving throw with their dexterity bonus for, and it improves incrementally, level by level, in a predictable way. It's a little easier than having 5 or 6 different percentiles to look at, or you could use it as anytime you want to. If an ability check doesn't seem right, a saving throw seems appropriate, but you're not sure what saving throw it is. Well, this just lets you use the saving throw because it doesn't matter. You don't have 5 different saves. You just got the one value. So I like the uniform saving throw when it comes to old school style games. So those are some of the mechanics that I like from different systems. I'm trying to think if there's any other that I really, think about. When I think about Frankensteining together my own system, those are 3 things I consider like those would be good. I think similar to the uniform saving throw, one thing that's very cool about Index Card RPG is just where you is it Index Card? I may be thinking of 5e hard mode. It's one of Runehammer's methods where I actually think it's 5e hard mode where 13 is the target for any ability or skill check. That's it. 13. You're a competent adventurer. 13 is harder than 50-50 chance. But with your proficiency and your ability scores, a really competent person can get a 13 more of the time. And then I think instead of using a advantage and disadvantage on the rolls, he just says plus or minus 3. I don't know. I have the book in front of me. I'm drawing off the top of my head, but I think that's 5e hard mode. It might be ICRPG. I'm sure Jason can let me know whether I botched that and whether it's ICRPG or not. But again, as you can see, I like things that just simplify target numbers, minimize the number of rolls, make it very simple to just say, here, roll against this number, and either have advantage or disadvantage, or we're always going to go with a +3 or a -3. I just think those are, I prefer a game that runs smoothly at the table where we're not stumbling over the mechanics and the things keep moving at a swift pace. Anything that can keep either the GM or the player from having decisional paralysis or having to take time and draw their turn out while other people are waiting. I think, the faster things go, turn to turn to turn to turn, the more engaging and the more exciting the game is. And you can see what happens, cheer, shake your head, sigh, giggle, laugh at the silliness of it, whatever happens, and then you can move on to the next thing and the game keeps going. So those are the kinds of mechanics that I tend to enjoy in different systems. And that was an 7.5, 8 minute response for one simple prompt. Wow. Okay, let's take a look at the questions for this week. For August the 8th, Monday, August the 8th, who introduced you to role-playing games? That was my friend Brian. Brian, I lived in a really small town, so probably 2/3 of the people that I graduated high school with were also in my kindergarten class when we started elementary school. Brian was another kid in my, from kindergarten on. We were really got to be good friends. Had a lot in common in terms of interests in science fiction and fantasy. We were both pretty good students and together in academic bowl, but even before we had formal school activities together, we were just kind of a group of 3 or 4 really close friends. I'd always considered him one of my 2 best friends growing up. Anyway, we were either in the 7th or 8th grade, and I lived in town and he lived out in the country, and so he also got to know some of the older kids on the bus that lived out kind of in this rural neighborhood that he lived in, and some of them played D&D. So they were high school kids, but they introduced him to D&D, and then a few months later, he introduced D&D to me and a couple of our good friends, and so Brian was the one who introduced us to D&D, and I think it was really kind of cool. I don't know what. I think he was using first edition rules. He didn't really have all the books. He would just study intently the books of his DM, and just memorize stuff. And then he made characters for us and would run us through some scenarios. And then he eventually acquired some of the monster manual and some stuff on his own. But that was the guy that introduced me to role playing games. It's kind of a bittersweet to talk about him. He was going to leave and attend high school at the Oklahoma School of Science and Mathematics. He's a very good student, very bright, and that was his. And he and I were always kind of neck and neck for who was going to be the valedictorian of our class. Even in junior high, I think everybody knew that was how it was going to come out. But in 9th grade, he was going to go to this. I don't know if it's privately or I think it's partially publicly funded, but it is you have to apply and get in, and the School of Science and Mathematics. So he was going to go live there through the years and was not going to be part of our. I mean, we're going to see him in the summers, but it was a great opportunity for him, particularly for a poor kid from poor backcountry Oklahoma. But the summer before he was going to move and start, he took a job at one of the local sand plants to get some money, and he fell off the back of a truck, and it backed over him, and he died. And it was the first time I ever lost a friend my age. The only people I'd ever lost before were sort of older relatives who were pretty 70s and 80s. So I've kind of wondered from time to time if he had gone on and if he had lived and finished school there, would we wound up going to college at the same place? Would we have reconnected, or would we have reconnected to get back together and start playing D&D in the world of the internet now? But yeah, that's who introduced me to D&D. My friend Brian, and I know he's kind of with me in spirit every time I play. So a little bit. All right, the next question for August 9th. What is the second RPG you ever bought? The second RPG I ever bought was Warhammer Fantasy 2nd edition, I believe. Yep. I played D&D. We started off with kind of a first edition, very quickly transitioned to second edition because it came out within a year or so of when I first started playing. And then I played second edition all through high school and college. Never got into the other really role-playing game. I took a break for about 4 or 5 years while I was in grad school, and then afterwards got back into D&D. By then that was third edition, and I've kind of played every edition of D&D since then. But probably the second one I actually bought when I got back into 3rd edition D&D. Some of the people I started playing with also played Warhammer, so I bought that so we could play Warhammer Fantasy, and so that's where that was the second game I ever bought. I really like Warhammer as well. I probably should have mentioned I do like the way the careers work in Warhammer's little mini. You can do so many levels of this, and then at some point you can transition, and you can that's pretty cool. I don't know why I didn't think to listen to that under my mechanics I like, but so yeah, that was the second one I bought. Let's see, for the 10th, when did you start game mastering? I started game mastering, what year would that have been? It's really, when you consider that I've been playing D&D since the late 80s, it actually took me quite a while to get into game mastering. I may have ran 1 or 2 sessions when I was in high school, just kind of one-off sessions, goofing around with friends. But I really, really started doing it, kind of towards the end of the 3.5 run. I kind of wanted to for a long time, but like I said, I took off for a few years and got back into 3rd and just relocated and just looking for other gamers, and kind of got in with a group where they had a DM, and then that guy moved on, so I stepped up and DM'd a couple times, and then that group didn't last very long, but then I thought, I'm just going to start my own group. And so I did, and that group in particular still... 3 of those guys still game with me online, pretty much every week or two. So that was a really good group that I played with for a solid probably 6 years. Not 6 years, 6 years. I played with him for a solid 10 or 11 years, and then when I had to move, they were all eager to keep that group together playing online. But that's when I started game mastering. It probably would have been around 2004, 2005 when I started doing it. And I, of course, since I've gone back and run older systems, some of the older systems that I never DM'd when they were the systems of the day. August 11th, if you could live in a game setting, where would it be? Wow, I'm not as adventurous a person as I like to pretend, as the characters I like to play. If I was going to play in a role playing game setting, I would probably pick the most modern, safe, advanced technologically. For Star Trek, I know Star Trek is a role playing game, but it's a role playing game based on a different independent IP. So I don't know if that's a fair thing, because that's not a setting that was created specifically for a role playing game. I probably live in Traveler in some kind of safe, the third Imperium of man, on some very safe, settled, civilized planet where I could have access to the best possible education, healthcare, and conveniences. So yeah, not much of an adventurer in that regard, if I'm being honest with myself. If I had to be an adventurer and live in any of the fantasy settings I've seen in games, that's a tough one. I honestly don't know. It's probably a toss-up between Forgotten Realms and Eberron. Those are the two that come to mind that I would probably want to live in. Why? I don't know. Familiarity, maybe. I feel like I know those places well enough to live, which is kind of odd because, I don't know. It's a funny question. I wish I had a better way to explain why those fantasy settings. Again, maybe it's because I know they're relatively safe havens in those places if you know where to look. Let's see. For the 12th, why did you start RPGing? Well, my friend Brian asked me to play. That was it. He's like, I got this cool idea. I honestly have no conscious memory of how we started. I kind of have the story and the time, but the exact conversation I don't know if he was saying, hey guys, have you guys ever heard of D&D? I'm playing with these other guys. Maybe we could play some. I really don't know how we got together that first time to play. But I know we were hooked once we did it. And then for the 13th, how would you change the way you started RPGing? I don't know. I really don't know how I would change it in terms of how I started. I wish I had been exposed earlier to a broader swath of role-playing games. Again, I mentioned, we lived in this really little town of like less than 800 people in rural Oklahoma. And so it's pretty interesting that anybody was even playing D&D, but that was the only game people played. Nobody was really playing Traveler or Marvel Superheroes or RuneQuest or any of the other games that would have been out at the time. And so that's probably why I just kind of stuck with D&D until, I was old enough and had a little more disposable income and some time to explore other role-playing games. But I kind of wish I'd been exposed to a broader genre and a broader system of games early on when I was a kid, as opposed to most of those coming as an adult. So, all right, that is it for week 2 of RPG a Day. And so now we will take some calls and some feedback from my show from week 1. So here we go.
Hey BJ, Jason here. Listen to your RPG a Day D&D with kids. I was thinking of other good games that kind of teach the game or teach what RPGs are and how to do it. And I don't keep up with the new games so much, but the first edition of Star Wars, West End Games Star Wars did a really good job of setting the stage there. Pictures from the movie and giving good references. And I think first edition of Star Wars is a really good one in that regard. Ghostbusters actually as well. West End Games Ghostbusters. And also Marvel Superheroes was a good one. TSR's Marvel Superheroes is a good one. Of course, all those are properties that are IPs and you can't buy them today. You have to go find used copies. But yeah, I think they all did a good job.
Jason, I would very much agree that those are good starting games. I think the West End game, Star Wars, has a very simple and easy to understand with its D6 system. And I think between Star Wars, Ghostbusters, and Marvel Superheroes, those are concepts, I would say, when we were kids in the 80s, but I think it's just relevant now because of the, Star Wars has been back for quite a while, as has Marvel, but then, Ghostbusters kind of captured the imagination of kids again with the latest movie. But those are, I do think it's easy for people to get into role-playing probably with an IP they're familiar with. They're familiar with Star Wars. They know what Star Wars stories and adventures are like. They know what a Ghostbusters movie is like. They know what a Marvel movie or a Marvel comic book is like, which might be a little easier to approach, particularly back when fantasy wasn't. I don't know, fantasy may be very approachable now, but back in the 70s and 80s, I think it might not have been easily approachable for some people who had never role played or who maybe that wasn't their thing. But they would have known what superheroes were, and they would have known Star Wars, and they would have known Ghostbusters. So yeah, I think pairing that with an IP that has images of the ships and the characters and the monsters or ghosts or whichever one you're dealing with, helps people get in the mindset, okay, this is the world I'm going to habit, and I'm kind of familiar with this, versus trying to maybe get someone who's not done a lot of D&D style fantasy or whatever the fantasy of the day is. I guess now though, well, we're going to have a D&D movie next year, so people will be aware of that if for some reason they're not now. But I think people coming into fantasy now would probably be thinking more Lord of the Rings or the movies, or probably, particularly kids now will be thinking Harry Potter. And I hope to God kids are thinking Game of Thrones. And people in their 20s maybe, but I'm thinking of kids kind of my son's age they're not ready for Game of Thrones. But yeah, I think those are all great suggestions, Jason. And as always, thanks for the call.
Hey BJ, this is Karl. Thanks for your RPG a day weekly. I think I might go that route as well. I was just debating on whether I was going to do it this year. The questions kind of threw me off, but after listening to you and to Runeslinger, to Anthony Boyd's podcast about it, I think I've got some inspiration. Most likely, I'm not going to do it today. I'm prepping for some other games, but I might do it like on the Thursday, because that's like the day in the middle, right? If you go Monday to Sunday, that's 3 days on either side. So I probably will. Hopefully, I'm shooting for Thursday to get this out. But thanks for the inspiration, and I'll talk to you soon.
Hey, Karl, always glad to be of service. Glad I could inspire you there a little bit. Looking forward to hearing your thoughts with all the prompts for this month. And what more can I say? Patiently await your next episode.
Hey BJ, it's Anthony calling in from the road, of course. And I enjoyed listening to your podcast yesterday on the first day of RPG a Day. I wound up not having time to reach out to you then, but now that I'm trapped in the car, we had loads of time. I'm glad to hear that you're going to be involved in helping kids and introducing kids to playing role-playing games. That's awesome. It's something that I do from time to time myself, and help them work with creative writing projects as a side. That's probably the goal, but to me, it's the side project of the gaming. But I think that to have someone help newcomers navigate those early days of playing is incredibly valuable. When I think about how so many people, in their 40s and 50s and 60s talk about, how difficult it was for them to figure the rules out on their own, or how difficult it was for them to figure the rules out because they were very young, things like that, or because they lacked experience with the games that loaned their nomenclature and their terms to early role-playing games, skirmish games and war games, that if there had been someone there to ease the whole group through those temporary roadblocks, then more people might have stuck with it. I think there's a lot of value to the very dedicated and the very engaged gamers who persevered on their own. I think, those of us who did that, I think there's a lot of value there, and it's understandable why role-playing games became such a lifelong pursuit. But at the same time, we hear stories of how many people, I used to play as a kid, but then I drifted away from it, or whatever, for whatever reason they drifted away from it. And I wonder if it could have been an even just an on-again, off-again part of their lives in a more distinct way if there had been someone there to guide them through it. So through after-school programs or library programs or community outreach programs, the scouts, whatever. Wouldn't that be great? But just as an aside, how do we know that we are not related? I went to a family reunion once, a long, long time ago. I'm trying hard to think when it was, sometime in the very early 80s, and was blown away that there was almost 1,000 people there, and a significant portion of them came from the United States. So, there's a chance. Anyway, take care.
Hey, Anthony. Yeah, it is an excellent point of how many people would have maybe stuck with gaming if an adult had been there to sort of referee, organize and referee the, whether it's refereeing as GM or just as an adult, kind of monitoring one kid being the GM for other kids. Some of the, the social contracts and the norms and the civility and things like that might not make, you kind of get sometimes a little more formal organization in clubs and organizations. So yeah, I think that's a good point. And also to encourage people when they're not having fun to be able to recognize this person isn't having fun. Let me ask them what would make this more fun for them and encourage them to find a way to enjoy the hobby. Obviously, you don't want to twist somebody's arm to keep going if they're really not having a good time. But, if you see people kind of, I think those are things as adults we tend to notice. But maybe as kids, either we don't notice or we do notice, but we just don't know what to do about it yet. Whereas adults, we maybe have a little more idea of how to have those conversations. So I'm eagerly awaiting to see how this goes with me, with the kids I played with. I'm going to play with, and I'm also you hear more how Colin, who does the Spike Pit podcast. He's become a teacher now. He's in his first year as a teacher over in the UK and is starting up a D&D club. My son was really looking forward to a D&D club at his school this year. And then the teacher who ran it left and took a job in another school district. And we don't know if it's going to, a new teacher will have to start over. Who knows? Maybe we'll get him to start his own with a little, there at the school. He's kind of eager to start learning how to be a DM. But yeah, good points all around for, how people can sort of keep others engaged with the hobby and the way they promote it and the way they encourage it and the way they, reach out to people and continue to create a place for people to come and feel comfortable and enjoy the game. So as far as us being related, I don't know. My dad's family is not real good at keeping up with extended family. So if you've got some American relatives from either Texas or the Oklahoma City area, maybe we are related. There's probably, at least a chance everybody with the same surname somewhere is related way back. If my understanding is Boyd is a Gaelic name from Scotland. So maybe we should all everybody with that name should have a big pilgrimage to Scotland and see if we can find our common ancestors. Anyway, thanks always for the call. And once again, thank you for coordinating RPG a Day every month. And I'll talk to you later. All right, that's the show. I want to thank my callers, Karl Rodriguez of The GMologist Presents, Jason Connerly of Nerds RPG Variety Cast, and Anthony Boyd of Casting Shadows, 3 really good podcasts that you can also find here on Anchor or on fine podcatching services everywhere. Be sure and check them out. I'll be back with another episode sooner or later.
Thanks for listening to the Arcane Alienist podcast. The music you're hearing is Come and Get It by Scott Holmes Music. The cover art I use for the episodes is by Dave Bone. Be sure and check out his website, ironseer.com, for a lot of other great gaming-related content. You can always leave me a voice message through the Anchor app or at the Anchor website, or you can email me at arcane.alienist@gmail.com. Once again, I appreciate you listening. Thanks so much.